Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Worried About Nothing podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how to hold your center when everybody disagrees with you. We thought it was quite topical as there are so many differing opinions at the moment. And we know that some of our opinions are fairly disagreed with or perhaps in the minority at the moment. So we thought we might just talk about that a bit more. And I'm Kim.
I'm Danielle.
And I'm Katya.
So it does seem like there were so many opinions flying around, and very, very heated opinions, and people disagreeing strongly left, right, and center. And at times like this, I guess it can be difficult to hold the center and sometimes even hold on to what you believe to be true, that you know it, but just when you're standing there and there's a bombardment of, no, you're wrong, no, you're talking crap, no, that's not possible, how could you even think that? It can be quite tiring and hard to do. So I think it's a very relevant topic today to what's going on out there.
Yes, I think so. It's definitely a relevant topic. And I've seen some questions on Facebook. So how do you cope at these difficult times? I'm sure everyone felt it in one way or another, whether it's with the COVID, with all the division that is going on, masks, no masks. I've seen some more division going on, some people from even in different provinces. So, for example, there were some people from BC didn't want to see people from Alberta and telling them go home and things like that because there was more cases of COVID in Calgary. So things like that. There seems to be more and more division going on. So it's definitely very heated on all levels. How do we stay centered? How do we hold balance and not to react, I guess, to what's going on and happening? It's so easy to just get into emotions of it, and then you're trapped. And when you're trapped, it is just scary, right? You go into fear. And I think everything comes down to fear. And it all comes down to fear of death. And once you're in the fear, you can be easily manipulated. How do you not go into that fear? I guess that's the big question. So what do you guys do? How do you not go into fear?
I agree with what you're saying. I think it is definitely fear and heightened emotions in people. I think when it's emotions, when people have such strong emotions that are really, really fear-based. Fear is it's like a wildfire, it spreads. So the more one person fears, the more everyone in the room will fear, and then the more everyone on the street will fear, and the more everyone in the community will fear, and it becomes this huge fire. And because of that strong emotion and that fear, like you say, that fear of death, it's such a survival thing, it's such a key thing that everyone will get swept up in it. And it's no longer rational, it's no longer balanced, it's no longer measured, it's just a panic reaction. And for myself, I feel that the only way to not be swept up in it is to stay centered, is to be in the core, and to really always be in touch with what I absolutely know to be true. So it can't be mind knowledge of what's true, because that can be so easily manipulated, because my mind, I find, can be swayed by arguments, rational arguments, but the core and the heart knows better than that. So it's staying in that place and kind of almost digging down deeper and deeper into it. So it can't be a touching on it. It has to be a real, I'm standing squarely in the core. And sometimes, like we were talking about before we started recording, sometimes just taking a break from it, sometimes stepping away from it, having that distance from it is important too, because when you're in the middle of that tornado, sometimes it can be almost the most peaceful place because all the chaos is happening around you and you're so still. But then if the chaos really becomes a raging fire, sometimes it's just about putting your head down and just stepping away for a moment. Because I find that, like I said before, sometimes on Facebook and social media, I can share quite a lot. I share a lot every day, and there can be a lot of emotional reaction to what I share every day. And I'm feeling that sometimes it might be good just to take a day off in between, not just to stop being so-called controversial, but just also for my peace, just to have a day of quiet. Because I feel it's important to stand up for what you believe and speak your truth, but then it's using discernment as to when to speak your truth and what to say, and not always fighting. Sometimes just taking a break, sleeping, resting. It's important because it's not about proving externally what you know to be true. It's just knowing it to be true, and sometimes it will flow out. But if it then shifts into wanting to prove what you believe is true, then that's going into the mind, and that's not being centered. So it's finding that balance for me, I find.
It's interesting what you said about keeping the distance. And I find the same, that not jumping into that hurricane and really staying centered and having that distance. And for me, it's also seeing that everything is just a human experience. Everything is just an experience. And if you don't so much jump into that experience, don't so much identify with it, and on some level, maybe not even care so much about it, then it really helps you, because you can stay more like an outsider and really just see what's happening without having those emotional reactions that can really swing you on one side or another and keep you completely out of balance. And then it's easy to jump into the fear once you're out of balance, but then you trust, and it's, as you say, it's very much about the survival instinct, right? So once you stay a little bit outside and observe what's happening, you still, of course, believe what is true and you follow your truth, but don't get involved so much emotionally.
Yeah, I agree with what you say, but I find that it's interesting for me in that when I post things or when I say things that I know are true and I feel so strongly are true, I have no emotional reaction or no emotional attachment to them. I'm just saying them. The thing that I find challenging is the emotion that comes at me from people. So I feel that what I'm saying or what I'm posting, to me, are neutral because it's just truth. And I'm not posting it from the perspective of, not always, but most of the time, I'm not posting it from the perspective of, I'm going to challenge you, or I'm going to cause an emotional reaction, or I feel strongly about this, or anything like that. To me, it's just, I read that as true, I post it, but the emotions of the waves of people disagreeing is the thing that can be tiring. So that's the thing I sometimes want to step away from. I mean, okay, yeah, like you say, sometimes I'll get swayed into the feeling emotional about it. And like you say, when you get into that state, then you've lost the center, you're part of the hurricane then, but most of the time I feel that I'm in the core with that. And I think the lesson or the learning for me in all of this is speaking truth. I feel that's important because I've spent too much of my life being silent about things that I believe strongly in. And I think because I'm at that stage of learning to do this, sometimes it can be a little bit crass, or it could be a little bit sharp, or it can be a little bit inelegant or ungraceful. But I feel that it's important for me to do this and learn how to be graceful while I do it, rather than staying silent because that's more comfortable. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, but from my perspective, and historically, I've stayed silent out of fear, or I've stayed silent out of not knowing exactly how to speak or how to do it coherently or how to express myself elegantly or in a way that people will understand. Whereas now I feel strongly about this. I might say things really badly or really boldly or really awkwardly that people might completely misunderstand. But I want to do that because I want to learn how to hone it, because for me it's important to speak my truth. It's like, in some ways, floodgates have opened, so doing these podcasts or speaking on social media, and I know all these little things are small things, but it feels very important to me in my resonance with the truth, so right here, right now, where I am, truth to me is speaking it, not only being it. And that might change. Tomorrow I might be just silently being it, but right now it feels important to express and to push, because it's helping me push through barriers and break through limitations as well. So I think that's also something to bear in mind, in that when we communicate and when everyone gets heightened in emotion and reaction and what have you, sometimes there can be real truth in the honesty of that, even if it's badly done or very emotionally felt or whatever it is. And we shouldn't stop ourselves because it's not perfect. That's a lesson that I'm learning, because I've always had a kind of perfectionist tendencies that, if it's not perfect, I can't put it out in the world. Whereas I'm sort of putting things out rawly and unformed fully and all of that. And that's really helping with the perfectionism, because it's not about the perfectionism. It's about the being true to yourself in every moment, whether it's failing, being wrong, saying something that's not true. But if it's true in that moment, it's true in that moment. And it's just listening to that inner truth. That's where I'm at. And it's quite, in some ways, very liberating, in some ways very scary, but it feels more true to me. It feels more natural, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful what you just said. I guess I didn't really have a lot of experience with people having those reactions to my posts. They either don't look at them or don't listen to them. And I guess many don't want to come to arguments, so they just ignore it. And so, yeah, I didn't really have a lot of, well, apart from maybe one person, I didn't really have any of those reactions to deal with. And maybe I will in the future, I don't know, we shall see. But at this point, I can't really speak to that point. But definitely, once you see the first comment where they challenge you, for me, it's really terrifying. It's like, oh, how do I respond? So I definitely felt that at some point. So yeah, I know it's amazing to see that you can respond to that from that neutral place. It's beautiful.
I think it's practice for me, because I think, like you say, it's terrifying, and everyone's at a different place. For me, maybe I'm in a place or something I need to be challenged. I need to stretch out of this, so the world is challenging, not the world, that sounds so dramatic, but, a few posts are challenging me, or a few comments are challenging me. And it's helpful because, the first time somebody challenged me, it was absolutely terrifying. I thought I was going to pass out. It was, my body reacted so strongly. But now it's getting to the point with the practice that I'm getting where, there's still a physical reaction. I still feel like, oh my God, I'm scary, but I can now rationally respond, or I can comment in a measured way, or I can say what I want to say without having that knee-jerk hit-back reaction, that kind of, no, you're wrong, it's you, or whatever it is. And for me, that's important, because I've never been able to do confrontation before. I've never really felt comfortable with any kind of challenge to my thoughts or feelings or person, really. So this feels like a good growth experience in that aspect.
I feel like remembering that when you posted it came from a place of truth can be really helpful too. Because most of the time you can look back and say, what was I doing when I posted this? Kind of re-review what the person's reacting to. And if you do remember, like, I was definitely in a place of truth when I posted that, it still resonates with me, then I find it easier to respond to that person, because the truth is not something that needs to be argued. You just know that it's true. So then you kind of can come back from that place, which is neutrality, because it just is. Whatever it is just is, and respond in that way.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I think also using discernment, in that if you post something or you say something in wherever it might be, because we do communicate face to face. I sometimes forget these days in the time of lockdown. But when you communicate something from truth and somebody responds from an angle of seeing it in a very different way, which is their truth in that moment, it's using the discernment to know when to respond and when not to. So the knee-jerk reaction might be to go, no, but I would like you to understand what I'm trying to say, or I feel that there's a different view that you could benefit from, or whatever it might be. But sometimes it's just going, okay, so we very clearly have differing opinions. Fine. You felt strongly enough that you had to comment. I don't need to prove my point or teach you. Not my place to do that. So I'm posting something, you're disagreeing with it, fine. Whatever happens now happens, Because I think sometimes that's where all the big arguing can happen on social media, especially, where people are so stuck in them being right and the other person being wrong that they need to educate each other. And when it descends into that, it's pure arrogance, it's ego, it's very dangerous ground, because that's where all the insults kick in, because both parties are feeling so emotional about it that they're insulting each other on that personal level rather than disagreeing with points or factual information. So I always want to try and be aware not to do that, because there's absolutely no point in doing that. Though the temptation is there, sometimes you can see how it would be very easy if somebody attacks you personally. But then in those situations, actually, if it's somebody is disagreeing with what I'm saying, I can sometimes let it slide. But if somebody attacks me personally, I will generally respond to that, because that's not fair and it's not right. You know, not always, but sometimes, because there's that sense of invasion in that situation. You know, it's kind of somebody is not only disagreeing with what you're saying, but they are telling you the kind of person that you are and putting a label on you. And in those situations, I'm more likely to push back and say, no, actually, I'm not this, this, and this. And you can believe what you want to believe, but I'm not accepting that. So it's finding those lines as well, I think, for me, because they've always been kind of shades of grey to some extent for me, because I've never really been a confrontational person. So I don't have that experience of knowing these yet. So I'm kind of learning as I go. But again, it's being in that truth of the moment. And if the truth in the moment is to go, no, you're absolutely wrong, rah, 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 then yeah, do it. You know,
what I tried it with the two people that I disagree with whatever I believe in. I tried to prove my point at the beginning, and then I came to a conclusion that I'm not going anywhere. So I'm just going to respect their view, and I'm not going to push. Just let them be. Let them believe in what they believe and respect that, and I will believe in what I believe and stay true to that.
Yeah, sometimes it is accepting that the differences are unsurmountable. And also, I think for me, there's an aspect of, I mean, I've been doing this over the last few years, but it seems to be heightened recently, an aspect of just not caring what people think, you know? So if people want to think I'm this weird, crazy, whatever else I might be person, then fine. They can think I'm crazy. Fine, I'll be crazy. I don't care. So that was a brief conversation about keeping your center, or how to keep your center when everyone around you disagrees with you. Thank you guys for listening. This was Worried About Nothing, and please tune in next week for our next podcast.
Excellent face.
Hey, we're glad that you face at the end.